Welcome, everybody, to episode 6, week 6 of See You at Mike's. I'm Trevor Binstock, so I've been told.
I'm Tyler Joseph Swatlowski the first.
And I'm Prem.
And here we are. I know I did ask, I don't know if we really fleshed it out, but do we have any silly goose stuff to start with before we get into it?
Well, I guess just some life updates. I got a fresh coat yesterday. This is more Columbia Blue adjacent. I took some grad pics with my friends, even though I'm not graduating. But I missed. I painted these afterwards. So if anyone else wants to take some more grad pics, I got some fresh nails. I also got a haircut after the grad pics, which was poorly timed, I guess. And so that's why I'm wearing the hat. The haircut is fine. Like, it's a very fine haircut. Some would say it looks good even. Some might say that. I guess for me, Swat said it looked good. So the last time I got a haircut was, a few months ago, and I was kind of debating keeping it longer, but just cleaning it. So I went to the barber and I said, hey, I'd like to keep it long on the top, middle, just cut the sides. And he did that, but he very much emphasized it. And I felt like it was like an interesting haircut I never got before. It was kind of like soccer boy-esque.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not, the last time I played soccer was Sunflake Youth Soccer, where I was on the best team, but I was the worst player. And I played goalie once and I let in 5 goals in a matter of 2 minutes. And that was the only time we ever let in goals in the entire season. So, which is all to say, I've never had a soccer boy haircut until a couple months ago. And it looked good. I thought it looked pretty darn good. And I was like, all right, hopefully they'll accidentally do that again. But they didn't. It was just normal haircut. So I guess that's why I'm wearing a hat. And it's a nice hat, it's a good hat.
Rumble Nun 31 says, hey guys. Hey Rumble Nun. How's it going?
Hi Rumble Nun 31. That's a fun name.
That is a fun name. I want to just say it.
What's the origin of Rumble Nun 31?
Rumble
Nun.
They don't.
That's a rhetorical question unless you want to make it not rhetorical.
I mean, yeah.
By answering.
If they say what it is, I'll update you guys.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
I'd have Twitch up on my phone so I could see these two, but she's gonna die.
Yeah.
So my graduation ceremony is gonna be on the 15th, but just be via Zoom, right? And so they just said, just upload a picture and you'll get your very own slide.
Oh yeah,
slideshow, and you'll get your name pronounced. So send us the phonetics of your name, or a audio if you're really worried that someone's gonna butcher it.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to. I was like, I could go take some pictures. I could do some ridiculous stuff, have that be my graduation slide.
Yeah.
But I was like, no, I'll just find one to have on my phone. And so it's just a picture of me at one of the football games playing snare. And I'm just I'm in traditional with one of the sticks up, and I have a mask on. So mask in my graduation slide, so poignant.
Oh yeah.
So this was his senior year, wore a mask the whole time. So I feel like I was really being, I was being metaphorical with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rommel Nun says their name is Rommel and their last name is Nunez.
It's Rommel.
Rommel. Oh, sorry, Rommel.
I thought you said Rumble.
Yeah, close. I said Rommel.
No, Rommel is the man.
Hey, the man.
Rommel's actually going to come on one of these sometime, so you guys will meet him soon.
Oh, cool.
He's just one of the sweetest people at Columbia, and probably just on the planet.
Well, welcome to the rest of your life being called Rommel. I'm so sorry.
No, dude. Rumble Nun.
Rumble Nun. Rumble Nun. Instead of Rommel Noon, as in Rommel Nunez. Cool.
No, we got a new gamer tag for you.
I'm so in love.
Yeah. We'll love that. Rommel, I think the Discord should be linked in the Twitch too, so feel free to join if you're not already in there, because you're definitely going to be a guest soon enough. But all right, so I think what we're going to start out with is this Twitter thread that I found yesterday, and I'll just kind of go through some of it. It starts out with "There's something very broken in our culture." It's from P.E. Mouskowitz is their Twitter
At
username.
_Pem_Pem. Follow them.
Yeah, to just citing our sources here.
Mhm.
They say there's something very broken in our culture. Most things being produced even by like quote unquote cool and quote unquote funny and quote unquote smart people are so boring. I don't know if this is how it always was and I just care more now, or if we're really just stuck in a rut. And they kind of go on throughout to describe how, a lot of new TV shows and movies that get acclaim are kind of sort of like following this formula. Kind of, all these things are being pushed out by the same like handful of publishing network and publishers and streaming networks. And, all of these kind of different companies really end up just being owned by like 3 people anyways. And like, even when we think there's this sort of like new like voice or style that feels like exciting, like the form isn't actually like breaking in a way. And that, maybe they can see that they have this like sort of romanticized version of the past where there were good inventive things and genre breaking things that were also popular. Like they don't know, but they're just kind of positing this idea that like there's this binary between sort of form breaking things that just like aren't popularized, or such as like low key like zines or magazines, like college, like things you might find at like a college campus or something, or just like your friends are making things, such as maybe this podcast some would say is genre breaking, but because we're not part of like big podcast, big Twitch or whatever, we're just not popularized. So there's the binary between that kind of like low key thing, and then the more sort of proxy, like form breaking things that are popular, but like actually aren't. They're just like, as they say, algorithmic culture has us all duped into thinking the popular stuff is the good stuff because we all ostensibly have a hand in making it popular. It's like an illusion that what gets produced is somehow our choice because we made the choice to tweet it, to stream it. So sort of like this like faulty democratization of art, which can be said about like so many things, like Twitter, for example. Like the internet and Twitter is supposedly like this democracy of your voice and being heard and communicating with the outside world. But it's also like, I mean, there's core influencers and like people with way more followers than other people, and like sort of like subculture on the internet where like these same kinds of dynamics play out. Like some people get amplified more, some people don't. So I'm interested. I mean, there's a lot here just in terms of like how we perceive art, how we think of it as like what we think of popularity of art, like what we think of sort of good art and like genre breaking art, like how those two harmonize. One example they have is like all of this is the reason things like Knives Out become popular, because people are craving the quote unquote smart, middlebrow, and popular stuff. So you either get things like Avengers, sort of like Marvel-esque, like things that everyone sees, that are kind of like following the standard formula of like superhero movies, or tiny things that like a handful of people see. And they say to have a shared experience around something that feels smart is a rarity. And then they, preface it by saying, it's not to say that Knives Out is actually smart or not, just that its popularity highlights what people are craving. It's sort of like a tidbit of this. And they kind of group this in with Queen's Gambit as well, of how like surprisingly viral it went. There's just like this hint that, regardless of how smart and like like interesting or whatever Queen's Gambit or Knives Out are, that like this sort of like immense like sort of like draw to them, especially during COVID, where like people are kind of like consuming things in a sort of different way than usual. I feel like hints at that sort of like a gap that people feel that they're not getting. So I mean, I guess go off whatever first is on your mind. There's so much here.
Yeah, I think one thing that I want to dig into right away, or the thing that jumped out to me first off the bat, was kind of like the like predatory nature of entertainment, and like specifically in terms of context of time. Like this person is really showing concern about like, are we falling into a trap? Like, is it getting worse? Am I just imagining that it's getting worse, or has it always been this
Right.
bad and I've just been ignorant up until this point? And
Yeah.
I think when I imagine entertainment, and especially like consumer entertainment or commodity entertainment, like throughout sort of the new wave of capitalist America, when you go back and you can see like in some ways like snake oil salesmen and like sort of these people who are like touting a panacea that's like a sort of performance of like this product that will fix everything, and that bleeds over into the sort of like Ripley's Believe It or Not kind of we're going to captivate you with something that you've never seen before. And it's very predatory in both of its exploitation of the people involved and also the like formulaic intent of getting an audience. Like, you will be there because you will never be able to see something like this ever again. And so this sort of predatory mindset around entertainment, I think, has been prevalent, at least in America, for since its inception. I think if you go back long enough to smaller cultural sort of like when people describe, I don't know, I saw this YouTube video talking about like shamans being comedians as well as like religious leaders. Like, they are also entertainers, performers, as well as people who will enact certain rituals. I think when you get into that sort of space, and like when you see maybe some of your favorite like motivational people are people in the spiritual world, and they're like really funny and exciting and entertaining and engaging, as well as being deeply intimate and moving. I think that hits more of the like non-predatory entertainment and consumerism, whereas like most things that you'll find, even with good intention, fall under the predatory nature because of the implicit capital gain required to continue that thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing, but like another sort of tension that this person is dealing with, like regardless of like whether that has always been the case, which, you know, like very well could be that, like, you know, big producers of something want to attract people, so like they'll like describe things as never before seen or whatever, like they're selling it essentially. But like beyond just that dynamic, like this person is concerned with whether in the past there still was a certain level of like inventiveness, of like form breaking, genre bending kind of art. And like those things could like both be true. Like you could like both be selling something, and it could happen to be true that like what you're selling like is actually accurate. Like, yes, like this thing is a never before seen thing, or like this kind of music or art or book like really like challenges like the canon in a certain way. So that's another question as to whether like it like how you said, like they're concerned with time, like the sort of like temporal aspect of like where they are in relation to like the timeline of like movies and art in like America or the West or wherever I'm from specifically. But that's another question. Like if you go back to like early 1900s or 50s, like whatever, another decade,
right?
Like, is it true that things like equally like sucked in the sense that like there was a certain like sort of proxy, like we thought that things were being like sort of bended and stuff, and it really wasn't. I mean, like, of course, like this is hyperbolic in a certain way. Like, of course, like if you like went through like the timeline of like evolving art, like surely things like were challenging things. I mean, even like because like it follows society, obviously. Like, like the first time like you saw like a black person that wasn't like just the butt of a joke, or like just like being a slave or whatever, or like being the help. in a movie. Like
Yeah.
that's like more obvious basic things, but I guess like they're obviously more concerned with like the sort of just like
General structure of the
Yeah.
product.
yeah beyond just like this sort of like face value, like, oh yeah, like that's different because society's different now.
Hmm.
Like I think they're concerned with something slightly different than that.
Yeah, I think it reminds me. I don't know if this necessarily applies, and I would love to ask this person about it. But the like the hero's journey. Have you ever heard of that from?
Like the archetypes or whatever.
That's the like Union like offshoot of it. But God, what the hell is his name? Joseph Campbell.
Okay.
His thing was these sort of mythic identities of stories from the Odyssey and the Iliad to the Bible. All these sort of things. Yeah, it is, yes, the archetypes, but like when you get into that, that's more of a Union idea. But Joey Cams is more of the like the content of these stories are like in a genre sense sort of amorphous and together and the same, no matter where you go. And I mean, even reading like the Ramayana, which is like a multi-millennia year old Hindu spiritual text, the like preface from a certain like Swami or whatever is, there is no other story that has ever been told but this one. And that was what, 4,000 years ago?
Right.
And so there is kind of like in the artistic sense of a sort of presumptive like posh idea of like originality being that like anything that fits in a mold, in a form, is not original and not good enough, or like isn't actually intellectual enough. But yeah, I don't know if you could necessarily go into it on what they said, but I think the point that I would bring up here in our conversation would be that like genreification may not be an inevitability, but that the nature of how we construct art and how we get to a product is through a sort of breaking and translating experience that comes out in a very subconsciously formulaic way. And if you are tuned to the content being super important at face value, then that can get really frustrating. But if you are tuned to the content being sort of a deeper, less intellectual and more spiritual sort of thing, you can get over the fact and idea of a formulaic experience.
This kind of gets into, I mean, also just like knowledge production too, like as in like there's like that basic kind of unsettling idea that, you know, nothing you've ever thought of or said is original to you.
Well, that can be upsetting.
Oh yeah, it can be, but in the sense that like, and it works in two ways, of course. One, just like, you know, like of how much like you're a product of your environment, of like, and then like, you know, who you've been around and things like that. But and that's one thing. And also there's just like the idea that like, oh, like there's been like billions of people before you. You think like you're the first wise guy to come up with that.
Right.
But then, yeah, also just the idea that like you are a human who has come up within these parameters and atmospheres that we are within.
But like,
so like the things that like come to you or like come to your brain are like not like, they don't come from a vacuum. But then of course there's like this question of, I mean, you're kind of getting into the like things produced from intellect and knowledge versus things produced from this other realm of like sort of like spiritual,
right,
or like transcendent mode of like not just thinking but like expressing what you're thinking. And the question is whether that is beyond this sort of like playpen fenced up thing of like what we think of as like knowledge that is produced by humans. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you were operating in that or trying to like approach that second method of expression, is that where you get into the real genre breaking? Not just in terms of like, oh yeah, like we perceive it to be genre breaking, like more genuinely,
Right.
but like that it like essentially like in the most material sense is genre breaking because it's like beyond the general like fenced in area of the human knowledge production that we think of as like, oh, like someone's thought of it before, or someone's like expressed this before, or like it, or at the most extreme sense, it like just like is like it's like Campbell could have written this in like a 30-minute little like
Yeah.
sketch out.
Right. I think like my mind jumps then to like it not being on the part of the producer of the product, but on the behalf of the consumer of where is the consumer coming to this product from? Are they coming to this product to look for entertainment, distraction, like forgetfulness, the sort of like anti-mindfulness consumerism that like fuels our economy? Or are they coming to it to sort of make sense of experience in the way that thought works? And like in that case, something that I don't remember, one of the Avett brothers said on a podcast was he was talking about, he's like, I didn't know really we were supposed to be making something that everyone would enjoy. Because the art that was creating wasn't in that space of like consumerist popularity idealism, but more in the we are trying to translate experience in the way that it comes out as integrated in our life as music. And so like I haven't seen Knives Out, I haven't seen Queen's Gambit, but I've heard there's like disturbing aspects to it, non-enjoyable parts of the experience of watching it. And so yeah, I think as like the consumer witnessing things that aren't fully enjoyable and still understanding or getting something out of the experience, I guess I would change my answer to it being both sides, both parties.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Trev, do you have any thoughts? I've been kind of monopolizing the sound space here.
I'm kind of having like a tricky time with this one. Can we go back? All right, so normally we haven't really done an exhibit like this before, but we'll sort of stay at our topic, tease out all the ways that like our mind goes, there we see this manifesting in our life, and if it was an issue, try to bring it around to like solutions, right? Try to be productive here. But I think it might be helpful to me if we go back to this tweet, skip a little bit of the middle, start with solutions and go from there, because that might just help me understand, like, at least from your two perspectives, what it is that's being said here. But so let's say at Pam so here's our issue. What do we do? Like if there's some sort of like angst, like unhappiness with like the way that you see entertainment like being popularized, what's the way out with your magic wand? What do you guys think?
Wow.
Well, I think also the question is whether we,
or what would you rather, what would you see, and what would you like to see instead of what's going on? So I think this one, it could be easy to say that it's sort of hopeless if you're going to say that like big producing companies are the ones pumping out all of like the information, so yeah, like where would you rather see this go, or how would you want the entertainment and content creation space to look?
Well, I think one important aspect of like envisioning an alternative to this is whether we fully agree with all the premises of it.
Right.
Because some of it could be like maybe over exaggerating, like maybe this isn't fully the case, you know? I think like broadly, I think they're right that, you know, as fewer and fewer people are like generally in charge of producing this stuff, there is a sort of formula that beyond just the sort of like Campbellian formula that we humans tend to follow,
right.
that kind of like they're just, you know, throwing things out there to throw them out and for us to consume. But like the question is whether we fully agree that like it's getting worse,
Right.
aside from just like the fault of like these corporations. Because I think like one, like to go back to your question, I mean, one like specific thing is like to just like with most things, not just getting all these monopolies that like
Right.
just are in charge of everything. Because I mean, for one, it monopolies are not like great for the people that are working to make these things happen, of course.
Right.
But also that also impacts how these workers and people making these things sort of operate too. Like it's not like it just because there's a monopoly, it magically makes things worse. Like there's the trickling dynamics that like you got to get this thing out, get that thing out, like onto the next one, onto the next one. Like we're just producing to produce and like consuming. I mean, competing with like the one other like movie making company. Like that's one thing. So I think like a more like basic objective is like not like enabling like big corporate mergers to just happen and like swallowing out smaller companies. Another is just, you know, like in a more like, individual conscious way of like looking out for like the more independent creators, you know, smaller box people that are writing or creating movies or whatever. Like that's like a, you know, pretty easy individual thing. I guess I'm just, the reason I keep going back is like there's so much here and I'm not sure, like there's not like something where I was like, oh, that's so wrong, like I disagree.
Right.
But like I think, you know, it's also one of those threads that like could just be seen as like, you know, like hyper analyzing.
They had a bad day and just like let something out, you know?
Yeah, man, I think the ideas are generally, I agree with them. I don't like see a problem. I just want to make sure we're not like fully operating on like, oh yeah, like they are right, this is a problem. And here's how to fix it, or like here's, you know, I guess like I'm just making sure we don't speed by right away. Because I think it's dense enough as is, and me and SWAT just made it way denser by like getting into these tertiary things.
Right.
So that's all. But with that sort of context that I'm kind of bringing back in, Trevor, is there something on your mind as to like, as you know, you're bringing about like what next? What's next on your mind?
Rommel just said a thing.
Rommel, please stop calling him Rommel.
I'm sorry.
It's Rumble.
It is a good bit. It is
Rommel.
A good bit. Rommel, if you like the bit, I like the bit.
Yeah,
but
if you're into it, yeah. If it's not consensual right now, so if you give me some consent, I'll continue to call you Rommel. But if not, I'll call you by your preferred name. Someone asked, I don't remember where I was, but someone asked someone what their preferred jelly bean was, and their response was he, him. Okay.
That's good. Preferred jelly beans.
Okay, Rommel said that they don't mind. Rommel says, I think the plot and motifs of the movie only feel uncomfortable because of the timeliness of the situation. Horror movies in particular are an interesting way to see this situation from in that they, many times, hyperbolize and eroticize mental illness for the sake of the narrative. You could argue that psychological thrillers that capitalize on these motifs only hurt these neurologically divergent people by othering them and portraying their illness in horrid ways in front of society. Argument could be made that Knives Out puts issues with immigrations at the forefront of societal conversations. Wow.
Interesting.
I guess one thing that I should like bring up, and Prem kind of alluded to it, like the disagreement with the premise of the whole thing is like, I do not exist in this sort of consumer world. Like what I am consuming is not a part of pop culture. I mean, like the things that I read are, I guess, a part of pop culture, and I like play video games, which are a part of pop culture. But for the most part, the amount of time and the amount of things that I am consuming is far below the average of a middle-aged, middle American consumer. Um, and so, uh, like, I don't know what the hell Knives Out is. I know that Queen's Gambit made chess really popular, but I don't know anything else about that. And so, sort of like, it's one of those things of like first world problems. I don't know if that necessarily applies, but like, the sort of like material argument that arises out of this thing only applies if you are a consumer of these things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I mean, given we're talking about like culture and mass culture,
Right.
the premise of mass culture is that there are thousands of people participating or consuming it. And even if we ourselves sort of like remove ourselves from some of it and, you know, only engage with some of it or whatever,
Yeah. Oh,
watching, and then I'll
it froze. Right after you said, I don't remember what you just said, but it froze.
Okay, well, mass culture, you know, where most people, thousands of people are engaging in it,
Right.
and engagement, it means, of course, both watching and reading these things, but also talking with others about them.
Yeah. Okay, so I think an addendum
there
that
needs-
I would make is like, I will be wrong.
Yeah,
because
okay, yeah,
of
that
my
makes sense.
because of my alienation from it. I will be misguided and wrong. So just like notify me if I say something that's out of touch.
Well, yeah, but also conversely, as someone, you know, who tries to, or not tries to, but that isn't necessarily like always plugged into those things,
Mm-hmm.
whether it means watching those things or talking about those things with other people,
Mm-hmm.
whether that was conscious or not, you're also trying to, or like implicitly or explicitly, like engage with things that aren't always necessarily like considered mass culture in the moment,
Yeah.
which means you at least have an idea of what makes you feel fulfillment, or what makes you feel like you're scratching that itch of
Mm-hmm.
highbrow and smart. Well, but also, I mean, what they were talking about of the itch is not just smart or like fulfilling, but also popular. So
Right.
that's interesting that, like, you know, you don't have that aspect. I mean, which you yourself said, but I guess another here that is we're coming up against is whether it's true that like people are craving something both
Right.
highbrow and popular.
Yeah.
Like I guess in combination. Like I think it's safe to say people generally like seeing things that are popular because
Mm-hmm.
of, you know, various reasons why people want to watch popular things, whether it's to feel included or whether like you think because other people like something you probably will too, like whatever, like there's a ton of, you know, other reasons. We can get into that as well.
Yeah.
But in general, people like to engage with popular things, and perhaps there is a good chunk of people that want to feel like they're seeing something, as they call like smart or clever or whatever, and perhaps there's concentric circles there for people, but I don't know if that necessarily means people are explicitly wanting the combination of both, like when they're
Mm-hmm.
like thinking about what they want in something. What do you think, Trevor?
I think that even if someone doesn't necessarily need it to be popular, you know, to want to like engage with what's going on, you know, people that, if you see Queen's Gambit as like, this is kind of like a little bit smarter, I like the content, but also it's nice that everyone watches it and we can all talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we play chess now.
Yeah.
But like aside from that, you might have people that want these like smart things to be popular just so that they can find them. Like
Right.
there's tons of content,
Right.
which is like sort of like some things, some top or ways to take this. I might set it on the auction table and see if you guys want to bid on them. But we like you want these things to become popular just that they're findable, you know, like it's not just buried in this mountain of irrelevance.
Yeah.
That it's like the entire internet of content creation.
And
Yeah.
that's what I think she's getting into
Yes,
with her
yes.
despair of the algorithmic nature of these sort of things, where we think we are mystified into believing through the algorithm that these sort of things are popular because we like them and we want them. But perhaps that the situation and the relationship is flipped around. And I think another aspect of this is like, and another sort of thing that I might disagree with is like the relationship to consuming that we have. When I consume anything, regardless of what I am looking for in my consumption, I never feel good, if that makes sense. I like there isn't like, when I consume, I realized this at some point, that I have a feeling and I don't want that feeling, or I am not engaging with it. And when I am engaged with any sort of consumption, be it video games, YouTube, podcasts, whatever it is, that feeling takes a back seat. It doesn't go away necessarily. It just is no longer in my realm of what I am feeling. So if there's a discomfort, if I lay down on the couch that's right behind me and there's a discomfort and I don't want to deal with it, that's when I consume. That's my relationship with consumption right now, is as a separation from the experiences that I'm going through that I would consider uncomfortable. And so when I am consuming, it is not for the idea that I'm going to benefit from it. It's not for the idea that I'm going to feel good about it. It is just a sole escapism from what I am feeling and what I am doing. And so that's my relationship. So a lot of the premises here of like what people are looking for, like, to me, it is, I am looking for a distraction. I just don't want to be here. I don't want to feel what I'm feeling. I want to feel something, whatever, as long as it's not whatever discomfort, whatever dissonance is happening right now. And I don't know how relatable that is, because I do live alone, unemployed, at a spiritual retreat center where I spend a majority of my day not consuming and spending time in silence alone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I definitely hear what you're saying. I say maybe to a point, like unconsciously, I'll have that relationship with consuming, but for the most part, it's quite the opposite. Where I'll be,
Right.
let's say with like a podcast, you know, if I'm working and I'm driving and could be fine just listening to the radio, just doing my job, you know, I was like, instead I'll think that I can leverage this time. Let's find something where I'm going to learn from, you know, like book
Right.
on tape. And so I seek out my consumption so that I hope to become, you know, more knowledgeable about something because of this, have a new perspective because of listening to this or watching it, or just, you know, be funnier by hearing these jokes or the way this person talks.
Yeah.
Like I'll listen to Hannibal Buress and just hope that I can like absorb his like just funny attitude, you know. So that's sort of different for me. But then there are also some parts of entertainment that I will like recognize. Like I've had a long day. I've been studying for like 3 hours. I could definitely just sit down and play video games right now because I'm not hoping to gain anything. I'm hoping to like take it down a notch with that.
Yeah.
So I want to go into, not that I want to go into it, but I want to like put a little bit more out there as if there's not enough already. So I do see, if you have an issue with like these big producing companies producing a ton of content or releasing like all the most popular content, so that's what you're going to see more. But there's no shortage of any other kind of content out there. You know, there's no shortage of music that isn't on the radio. There's no shortage of like film that isn't on Netflix and everything like that. There's no shortage of tweets that aren't by celebrities, right? But I think the problem is there's just like economically, there's the super wealthy, you know, although it's not created by the same reason, there's just so much content out there and just so many ways to access it that like it's crabs in a bucket. as soon as someone's like maybe going to the top, you're not necessarily trying to pull them down, but like it's all just going to get lost in this mix unless it's really just shot through the top.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily, it also, we kind of get desensitized, I think. This is a little bit scattered, but I'll keep going with saying before the internet, if you were learning guitar, right, you would like play, maybe before you started picking it up, you went to a concert. You went and saw Guns N' Roses and you saw Slash play, and you were just like seeing that and you're like, that's mind blowing. I've never seen anybody play guitar like that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Whereas now you search like one video on guitar on Instagram, then you can go into the Discover and just scroll endlessly of ridiculously talented people doing really, really cool stuff on the guitar. You just get so much of that. And so I wonder if we start to lose like a recognition for knowing when we've been entertained or even been impressed or, like, so I think of seeing a really good movie, I can still recognize, wow, that was a really good movie. Like I'll think about it when I'm going to bed. I'll want to watch it again. But just imagine now if you had seen like only 4 other movies that year, versus just tons and tons of just like short video content that you're constantly going through.
Yeah.
That makes me think of like achievement and sort of like the idea that like the reason why achievement is like such a like detrimental sort of mindset to go into, and argue with me about it. But once when something is achieved, you have that like moments of fulfillment and then it becomes irrelevant. And so when you're in achievement mindset, to stay in that achievement mindset, there has to be an achievement that needs to be met. And so all the things that have been achieved become irrelevant. And when we apply that sort of mindset to like wanting a certain thing out of consumption, out of movies, whatever, I think maybe one of the things is like our wants are being met at such a fast rate that the desensitization comes from so many bursts of that achievement sort of like yum-yumness of getting what you want so fast that the next one comes and the next one comes and the next one comes, and you have the space and the time and the ability, if you're on the internet, to continue to look and continue to find as long as you want, forever and ever. And I think that is what, to me, pointed me in the direction of like, oh shit, I'm just distracting myself. Because when I say it like that, that is a retrospective rationalization of what I did at the time. But I do feel that my relationship to it was, I am looking for something. I listened to Pete Holmes' podcast to get like a spiritual sort of thing. I listened to Ram Dass to get like a spiritual sort of fix. Like there are reasons and things that I'm reaching for and wanting, but it's getting clicked in at such a fast rate that I find when I like open up YouTube and I watch a video, and then I'll watch another video, and then I look for a video and I start getting bored and I want to find something. And then I keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going.
I think this is helpful for me because now we're kind of paralleling P.E. Moskowitz. Like they were kind of, stream of consciousnessing their own sort of frustrations with us. And I think we're kind of paralleling that path.
Right.
And that like we're kind of like breaking it down ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think, Swat, you're talking about like this constant like ability to find like the yum-yumness whenever you want. And Trevor, you kind of spelled it out that like whether this is desensitizing us in a certain way. But so then the question is, does this not only like impact how we feel when we get that, constant gratification of the yum-yum? Does it also alter what we feel the gap is?
Right.
As in, do we, as this person says, do we crave this formulation? I mean, they call it this sort of like combination of popular and, smart and clever, genre breaking, like whatever, like, but in general, is this not only shifting how we feel when we satisfy the the want, is it also shifting what we think we want is the question. Because I think at this point in time, like, the fact of the matter is that is how the internet is. Like, that is how, like, whether it's like a TikTok feed where it's like a For You page that's like based off of the algorithm that plays to what you seem to want to watch, whether it's like the like Facebook ads, or whether it's and also just like, I think like Facebook's algorithm in general that kind of like only shows you what it thinks you're gonna want to look at now. Like, even if you like get to choose your friends and stuff, like like sometimes when I like scroll on my Facebook, like I'll realize like there's just certain friends that I just never see, like on my whatever, like timeline or whatever. But like, they're still probably active there, but I just don't see them.
Right.
Like, is all of this kind of shifting? Because it's funny, because it's working in two ways. It's both like these companies and their algorithms are kind of shifting our perception of what the world is, because the algorithm just shows us what it's showing. Like, of course, like,
you might want to
beyond
mind
just
your
like,
clicking
beyond
with the
just
pen,
like
by the
echo
way.
chambers and stuff. It's also more just like, even like with your friends, like it shows you only certain friends or whatever. But then there's also like the internal, like if we're kind of modulating in relation to that, but also are we just modulating because we're getting desensitized? Like, how are we responding to this? And that's concerning, like, because it feels so like out of our hands. We're just like implicitly responding, but we don't know that we're responding. We're just like either getting super comfortable with things to the point of like not even realizing we're just kind of like not being engaged or not engaging with the world. And I don't know, man. That's when you truly think about it, it's horrifying.
I smell another pendulum here, and here's what I'm conceptualizing.
Here we go.
Here's what I'm conceptualizing.
Here we go.
Okay, a sort of like where we are imagining our society as like a machine of consumption that is consuming to find something, would be one side of the pendulum. And then sort of if you take a shallow look at when like I take a shallow look at consumption as being a bad thing because I see it as a distracting. Let's say I see it as a bad thing, and so I want to not consume, and so I stop consuming for a specific reason, and that's the other side of the pendulum. Do you feel? Do you reckon?
So you're like
a sort of maximalist approach to consumption versus the minimalist approach to consumption.
And say the minimalist again.
The minimalist is like seeing consumption as a bad force, and so wanting and desiring to not consume to find something else.
Consuming meaning consuming in mass culture or consuming generally?
All of it, yeah, generally, sure.
And what's the something else? Like just something to satisfy?
Yeah, that sort of click,
But also the question there is that, are you trying to satisfy it in a different way, or are you trying to just create different wants, so to speak?
Yes,
like
that's what the pendulum is creating different wants. That's why it's still on the same axis, because it's not changing the relationship to the consumption.
Right. The variable is just what you're wanting.
Yes.
Okay.
And so in the way of like consumption as like the material way to hit the ends of satisfaction and distraction and feeling good, I feel it's similar to the sort of misguided forgetfulness on both sides of the spectrum to sort of like, are you doing this to like in attempts to meet an end? And if you are, then engage with what that ends is and what the means means, and then you will change your relationship with all of it, instead of consuming more or consuming less. So
either way, the common denominator of of wanting is fine, because I mean it's fine to want things and to want to scratch an itch, but it's just a matter of how you're scratching the itch, and whether, because also how you're scratching the itch determines whether you're actually scratching the itch.
I would also say that it's not fine to want. Yeah, okay, so like let's take an experience of wanting. Okay, sanity ship, it's docked, okay, but it's about to sail. Okay. So when you're in the space of wanting something,
Yeah.
the world, when you look out of your eyes,
Yeah.
you begin to witness the world in terms of if it's meeting the want or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so things stretch and break and get categorized and broken into that this is meeting want, this isn't. This is meeting want, this isn't. And so
Right.
like you'll watch the Avengers and it doesn't meet your want. And you don't care about anything, you just experienced it and it didn't hit your want. And so that goes into the file of it didn't hit what I wanted. And then you watch Queen's Gambit and something about it hit your want button. It made it into the category of want. Okay. And so the world is breaking down. And I would say that this is alienation. This sort of categorizing and separating of things that happens through does this meet what I want or not? Because everything gets put into that relative formula of like, is Trevor meeting my want button or not? Is Prem meeting my want button or not? And like it becomes extremely lonely when you're existing on that axis of is this want or not want?
Right.
And so like I think this is where the like Buddhist like get rid of your desires and you'll figure out what is
Right.
good comes from.
Right.
Not because desiring is bad, because if you think desiring is bad, then you're just recategorizing desire into a not want, and that's still
Yeah.
alienating. Like you
Right.
haven't done it enough. This is harkens back to the reacting to experience versus reacting to thought.
Right.
If you're
Right, right,
wanting,
right.
you will always react to that want.
Yes. Yes. So that makes a lot of sense, and I think is in
That makes
harmony
sense.
with, well, in the sense that it harmonizes with things we've said before,
Right.
Especially the experience versus thought, like reacting to experience versus reacting to thought. And I see Ramal has a question. We'll address it after this sort of,
Yeah.
after
Yeah,
we solidify this, because it's a good question. But if oh my gosh,
Holy Daedalus PCMR. What a question.
I saw that. If so want can want itself also be like, if, as you said, like not desiring things is put into like the not want category if you choose to do that. So that's the same with want itself, right? Like,
Yeah.
as in avoiding wanting.
Right. Because
So-
like what we
So
tr-
free.
what we
I was-
try to do is figure out what are the most efficient and best wants to hit our buttons. So like if you're a
Right.
spiritual person and you're on the spiritual path, what you're
Yeah.
you're gonna put peace in your want pile. You're gonna put equanimity in your want pile. You're gonna put like some sort of a devotional thing in your want pile, and in your not want pile, you're gonna put war. In your not want pile, you're gonna put like material gain and these sort of things. And the idea that we're working with here is that if I can curate my wants and not wants in the right way, I will find the best formula for figuring out how to hit my buttons the best way. So in terms of this consumerism sort of thing, it's like if I can curate my wants and not wants good enough, I can cut through the bullshit of the algorithm. I can cut through the bullshit of oligarchy and or oligopoly and the sort of like only 3 big producers. I can cut through all that shit and find the real juice. Does that make sense?
And you're saying that
It's
isn't necessarily
bullshit.
what we,
Yeah.
So then to sort of like modulate ourselves a bit and like reposition ourselves
Yeah.
beyond like falling into like the putting things into want and not want,
Mhm.
what is like the like means of navigating that? As in, how do you get into the? And yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Ramel. I
Right.
was kind of speaking to some of that. How, like, what does it mean to like? Is it just a matter of us then like accepting that this is like uh the sort of equation we're faced with, and then sort of trying to avoid? But
Right.
you know what I'm kind of running up against here.
Yeah,
I
no.
want to
Oh yeah,
Go
I
go
want to
Trev.
Trev.
pose a challenge to the idea of, okay, so what you said, like
Mm-hmm.
you've got these wants and you're not wants, and you're creating a formula, an equation that's gonna like get you to this point of like hitting your switches the best, right?
Yeah.
Like, here are the things that I want to like feel, experience, and so I'll use my wants to sort of like guide myself in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying that it's like not the most effective way to do that, but what if the end goal of this and curating your wants and not wants isn't just like hitting your like desires and like stimulating yourself in the right way? What if it's sort of like becoming a good or effective person? Like,
Right.
let's say your goal is just to spread as much joy and create like as much justice as you can in the world.
Yeah.
Then would your wants being peace and what have you, in that case, would they be more effective as a guide versus just thinking about what it is that I need to satisfy?
I think that is the primary and most prevalent trap that desire falls into, is that sort of like, how can it be bad if I want good? And like, I can't necessarily argue against it. All I can know is that, where this reflection came from is like, if I want justice, if I want peace, then when I look out of my eyes, I'm seeing the world in terms of, is this bringing peace or is this bringing war? Is this bringing peace or is this bringing war? Is this bringing peace and this bringing war? And so no longer am I seeing the world in terms of the experience of the world. I am seeing it then in the experience of its peacefulness or war or violence. And that aspect of it is what is the alienating force. The sort of reacting to it being good or not is what forms the separation that breaks the experiencing the experience versus experiencing the thought. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question? I think there's a little bit more that I have, but yeah.
I think it answers it, but I don't know if it necessarily is like fully reconcilable, in the sense that like you can also evaluate things you experience in terms of like the quality of the experience. Do you know what I mean? Like in this like hyper example, which I think is a good example to use, because I think
Right.
this is really testing the bounds of it, of like, if you are a person that is seeking justice and peace and you evaluate things based on how peaceful and how violent they seem. Of course, like if you remove things from like their contexts or whatever, and like only judge them in a binary, that can, as you say, be alienating and like remove them from like the surrounding sort of like human and life quality of them.
Right.
But is there such a way, or such a way of being, such that you evaluate those things within the aspect of the human experience, as in like you evaluate them among your experience?
Yeah.
Because I think that complicates this sort of barrier between like reacting to experience, which is, as we kind of discussed, is like a good thing, to react to experiences rather than reacting just to like your thoughts on things.
Right.
And then this sort of like risk of like only seeing things in two buckets. Like I think there is something here that harmonizes that a bit, which is just not just having these buckets exist in a vacuum, but having these buckets exist within life.
Right. Yeah. I think like what I get drawn to is like, I don't have an authority to say whether it is good or bad to want, but I can say that my experience has been that all my wantings and desires have led me to anxiety, have led me to imposing my will upon other people and the world yeah, which is what I call violence. And that the only ways that I have found harmony with what is going on is through openness and acceptance, and not through a wanting of even good stuff, even morally right stuff. Like that has led me to cognitive dissonance, to an othering of people, to
Yeah.
a hating certain things. But when I release myself from that sort of dichotomy and that dogma, I can love pain and relieve pain through that sort of openness. But I didn't have the ability to do it because it didn't fit before. And when it didn't fit, it was alienated. And I was not integrated with it. And thus I had no grounds to work with, except for you should feel better.
Yeah. And I think this, especially this idea of will imposition, I think is it doesn't necessarily help me like fully agree with exactly what you're saying.
Right.
Which is not to say that I disagree with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the will imposition, I think, is compelling such that like if we as individuals are evaluating things, like in this extreme example, let's say about like whether something is good or bad, whether something is peaceful or not peaceful.
Right.
I mean, colonialism, hello. The very easy example of people deciding what was good, what was not, what was peaceful and what is violent, and then using that as pretext to then just like violate millions of people, imposing your will upon people because you think what you see is the good. I think that at least is a sort of like immediate way for us to sort of get to what you're saying, which is just like the basic idea of like when you have these buckets, they're your buckets. They're not this sort of like neutral, all-encompassing human evaluation of what is good, what is bad, what is they're obviously because they're the buckets of your wants. This conversation is about wants,
and it gets more complicated instead of more simple.
Right, but like, of course, the basic premise of wants is that they're yours. Like they're what you think you're valuing, or what your itch seems to be. So then, if we're at this point where we're kind of, I'm starting to chew vibe a bit more with what you're saying here about and even initially when you described it, I understood it, but I think like at least in this sort of aspect of it, I think it's helping me sort of accept it a bit more. But if we're at this point of like where want itself, like in this sort of like personal way, can kind of alienate not just your conception of these things, but also just you from these things, it's actually quite important because we're talking about mass culture.
Yeah.
Which is this person was talking about like this common craving for a sort of shared experience of something that seems genre breaking, something that's form breaking.
Yeah.
We're at two different levels here, two different planes of us identifying this sort of individual tendency for us to kind of evaluate wants in terms of, is this thing bringing me towards the want or against the want? Kind of like the Marie Kondo, like, is this thing bringing me joy or not? But perhaps a bit more like even more like toxic in a way. But then there's the thing that we initially started out with, which is, are we craving something common and shared and sort of revolutionary in a way? And if so, if we're craving this, why are we not satisfying that craving? So how can we do this? Trevor, what are you thinking?
Can I fire off like 3 different like seemingly unrelated things that I've just been sort of sitting on here, because I do want to bring it back to like the entertainment aspect and like
go off.
Why we might not be getting what we're looking for. All right, SWAT. First of all, there are some things that you say on this podcast that I can't hear and discuss in the same hour, probably not even like the same day or week, just because they're so different. One of them was, you were talking basically in your relationship with Hannah, and it was like, I just go into the thought of like her cheating on me. Whereas like just like letting it go, like whatever, there's nothing that she could possibly do to make me not love her. And I would still love her if she did that.
Yeah.
You know, like and still like want this to be the relationship that it is. And doing that just like makes it so that the idea of cheating can never become a wedge in between you. Like that's a huge paradigm shift. And so it's same thing here with you're basically saying that, you know, like against like wanting as your like direction towards you know, like how you sort of manifest yourself in the world.
Right.
Like that's something that to adopt that wholly would require like a huge death of so much
That's
of
exactly,
what you would always think. So that's definitely big, but that's something where I'd have to hear it a couple more times to fully understand and then think about, because yeah, that's something that's so different from just like generally how people see things.
Right.
And then I think from that, oh yeah, but that way of thinking where want isn't the way, it is so much less sexy to like being an effectual person. Because I mean, you think about like, let's use Batman for example. His parents get killed. He becomes this just like dark, brooding, just black hand of justice. You know, where like he wants justice. You know, he wants bad people to not do bad things. And that's like his driving factor. He's like, these people are like the scourge of this city, and like alienating them is like what he has to do, you know, to like crush them and make it not happen anymore, basically. And so that's, you know, that alienation is way more of something that people will look at and go, hell yeah. I hate it when that happens. You know, I want that never to happen.
Right.
And so, yeah, like that's tough because that's just what you look at.
You said Batman, right?
Yeah.
Batman's a cop.
He is.
He wanted to, he could have just became a cop. He was just a glorified cop.
Well, he is a cop. Like, I mean,
yeah,
he's
but
a cop.
He could have just, I don't know, just
gone through the training.
Yeah, I mean, if he's,
but he's got an image, like he's got a real life image. So like himself couldn't have been a cop because he's
because he sees himself as something else. Yeah, he's not like the other girls.
Yeah. He's a rich motherfucker.
Yeah. He's just as carceral. He just is also rich. He's like the combination between the people that command the cops and the cop.
Yeah. No, I mean he's the actualization of like the elite becoming laborers in enforcing their own.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Doing power. Their own dirty work essentially.
Yeah.
Anywho, sorry.
Did you have a thought that got derailed?
Sorry.
He's not just the cop. He's the bullet in the gun. All right, no, I'm just moving right along here on like more of this stuff.
Yeah.
Right away when we started in SWAT, you're like, I'm disconnected from a lot of this entertainment. So, and your point was that I just might not be right on like a lot of what we're talking about. I know when you get into social media algorithms and you're saying, I feel unfortunate that, you know, what I'm looking at and consuming is directed by like Twitter's algorithm or what have you. And a really easy, or, you know, you think about like your phone monitoring what you say in advertising. You're just like, oh, my friend got the Oculus. He said it's pretty sweet. I use the Oculus ads. Like that, you know, that's frustrating with the algorithm and everything. And one thing you could say is, you know, like you're only giving those things as much power as often as you use your phone. You know, if you didn't use your phone, it wouldn't be a problem. It wouldn't happen.
If you didn't use that damn phone all the time.
Right. And like you could say that, and that could be satisfying to a lot of people, you know, like I don't like that does cause me, whoa, I'm just not going to like use my phone as much. I'm going to cut back. But here on this podcast, on See You at Mike's, just like we said, you like create the society and the community that you're part of. The socially responsible thing to do is to assume that mass culture isn't going to change in that way. Rather, we have to like meet mass culture where it is, which is subscribe to Netflix for the most part, carrying an iPhone in their pocket, and using social media. So
Yeah.
I liked staying on that and like rising to that.
Right.
And then one big thing though, also with having like these algorithms and, you know, like these sort of things that are curated for you, and you think, how do I stop like just consuming the world through like this lens that might not be what it actually is? It's just sort of like I see more and more of like one thing, you know, it gets distorted. And I would say just like if we're talking fixes, a big part is going to be traveling and just meeting new people. Because I think about the friend of yours that is an animator, and he made like a music video and worked with Mod.
Yeah.
Like that's something where I would never like that was cool content. You know, I would never, it wouldn't come up on my Instagram, you know, it's not going to come up on my YouTube, but
Yeah.
since I know you can show that to me. Now just
Yeah.
imagine all other kinds of people that are going to have friends like that do really cool things, and they can help introduce you to it, because big producing companies aren't going to do it. Social media might help, but probably isn't going to quite do it.
Right.
And then also traveling. It's something that I don't do much, just being in college, but I know one thing that people really like about it, especially going to new countries, is like there are so many norms that people just absolutely live by here. You know, you just like don't question it. That's like the world is. And you spend enough time somewhere else and everyone there just, you know, acts totally differently. It's like, well, why do we do that in the first place? You know, like, does this really need to be there?
Yeah.
Then maybe you can get into like, how did it come to be? What purpose is it serving?
Yeah.
Is there some like injustice that is just not being recognized because of that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I think 2 points. One is I think they cut the original tweeter kind of alludes to this too, where they're just like, anyway, you know, I should probably just like read my friends' blogs and zines and stop expecting to find things that interest me in popular culture. But like what you're saying, I mean, naturally is that like, I mean, even things like zines, I didn't know what a zine was until I left North Dakota.
I don't know what a zine
I didn't know what a zine was until 2 seconds ago.
Yeah.
I didn't even read it, right?
And it's like, well, okay, also to clarify, a zine is just like a sort of like smaller, like,
oh no, yeah, I got it through
population,
context,
like,
but
okay, yeah, they're like, instead of magazines, they're like, you know, sort of like
zine,
sort of self-published, like kind of like, you know, either individuals or like groups of like individuals, like little small like clubs, organizations, like make these, and like they can be sort of like specific subject matter or just like culture, generally, whatever. Like they're just like magazines, they're just more like low key. And they're like oftentimes very like creative and filled with lots of like self-expression. So like you'll see them a lot on like college campuses. But you know, to your second point, Trevor, of just like our physical relations to people, is that like, I mean, especially in America where you have, and I didn't fully, you know, you sometimes forget just how many people are in this country, like just how large this place is like, yeah, that like we're vaccinating millions of people a day, but like the actual like feeling that like we're gonna have herd immunity soon is like a crawl, because there's just that many people here, and like we have so much land mass, but physically speaking, like to go from one place to another is you either take a plane, which of course, you know, costs money, costs time or whatever, or you take a massive road trip. Otherwise, you know, if you're in like Colorado, and like you're not a very like cosmopolitan person, like you like being in Colorado, whatever, all your family's in Colorado, whatever, like why would you go to California or Florida or Texas or Georgia or, you know, just anywhere else? And like you're just always in Colorado. And I mean, don't get me wrong, Colorado seems great, like I love Colorado, or like the idea of it. I've never been there, but there's just so much. And I mean, this isn't revolutionary anywhere, but like there's, like as you said, there's so much, unless you're exposed to it, you would just never know. And I think one specific injustice of living in America is how hard it is to physically be in other places and see other people and know that you are among so many other beautiful and interesting subcultures of people, and that you begin to, especially in certain parts of America, you begin to think that your world is the world, and that and of course it's a specifically American thing, it's a specific nationalistic thing in general. When you live in a country and a place, like, you begin to take ownership and pride of your place. But when it's also compounded with the fact that it's so hard to go somewhere else for just an average regular person, you just miss on so much of the world. Like, it's an algorithm in the most purest physical sense, in that
Mhm.
on the internet you only see what the algorithm feeds you.
Right.
In real life in America, you only see what you're physically allowed or able to see.
What the universe has
And
algorithmically put for you.
and when I mean, if you want to think of like easy material ways to solve this, I mean, one is just more community spaces within communities themselves, because
Mhm.
this also happens in towns too. Like, eh, other than, like, in the past there were things like union halls or just like churches when church membership was higher, where like
Yeah.
there would be a physical space where you would be around other people more often. And for us, I mean, especially as young people, you don't think about this as much because we went to elementary, middle, and high school. But think about how many times you would have seen people in your community if you didn't have high school sports, if you didn't like sell cookie dough for school, if you didn't do like just anything that
Right.
revolved around like the parent teacher association or like school sports or anything. If you were just like a person that maybe had a job or didn't have like a conventional job, or you're an older person, when do you see people?
Yeah.
There's no conventional American acceptance of community spaces for gathering. And whenever they're proposed, there's so many like people from local government on up that vehemently do not want it. Either A, because it's like, oh, we don't spend tax dollars on that, or because they know that if more people were together, their political interests would not be served.
Mhm.
And that's one thing of just the idea of community spaces. And which is not to say that there's any like we couldn't imagine them. I mean, even things like libraries, if we encouraged people to see them for what they could be. Like, this isn't like an anti-bar stance, but like, it's so common to like go to a bar, like if you want to be social.
Yeah.
But like, imagine, and I don't care if this sounds nerdy, like just people being able to go to a library at odd hours of the day. Like, instead of like drinking away your sadness, you could just like read a cool book or like see some people at the library and talk about this, do what we're doing just in person with
Yeah.
people. But then there's also complementary to this is that whenever things like high-speed rail or just more train access across the country, linking places together, whenever that is pitched up, it's always shut down by people too, like politicians too. Because again, like, oh, we're not going to spend that kind of money, or like, or because big oil and big gasoline
Big
and big
oil.
highway would never want more trains, because then we wouldn't have thousands of gas guzzling monster trucks just like driving everywhere and just like swallowing like 60 gallons of gas every like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just, there's so many ways that people and these subcultures could be not necessarily like converging into one, but at least know that each other exist. And
Yeah.
these solutions exist. And it's just so deeply frustrating that we're just that is just like one of many injustices that we take as conventional, or not even take as conventional, but that we just are conditioned to think is impossible.
Right. And the sort of like another pendulum, if you will, is like you brought up trusting your experience. Like if you live in a culture like in middle America or like on the internet, like if you trust and ascribe to your experience too much, that is like a detriment, because what is happening is the only thing that can happen. And like anything outside of that becomes alienated, weird, or whatever. And then also the sort of like not trusting your experience is detrimental, where like you are not integrated with the society and culture that is directly around you and directly responsible for like what is going on. Like if your politics only exists on the internet and you haven't talked to anyone that you know materially and have had material conversations, everything will be abstract, like mystified, internetized, and it won't have any material impact on like the world around you. and like
Yeah.
you'll just spend time like tweeting about your sort of discomforts in the political world.
Yep.
I'm trying to think of like what if that is a pendulum of like sort of trust your experience or not trust your experience, because we have seen both that trusting your experience in certain contexts is beneficial and trusting your experience in certain contexts is detrimental, and not trusting your experience is beneficial and trusting your experience is whatever the vice versa of what I just said. If that's sort of like a telltale sign to me as a sort of pendulum thing of like what is the relationship that this trust or not trusting your experience, where is that hitting on that like mystical transcendental human note of like where are we going here?
Yeah, I think, well, one thing we talked about in one of the earlier episodes was just like, I think we were talking about toxicity. I don't think it was necessarily about masculinity, but it was about just like conviction and like, feeling comfortable releasing yourself just from, it was about identity, political identity, and like being comfortable releasing yourself from things that you feel like you have to be like very much like clenchingly tied to.
Yeah.
And like when you release yourself from that, you also feel less like called upon to like defend them so like reactionarily. And so like I think this kind of echoes that in the sense that like you should trying to strike that balance. And of course, as with most pendulums, typically, except I think one previously in the last episode, I'm not saying like to meet in the middle, but of the harmony between embracing experience to the full extent, but not holding on to it.
Right.
And I think, or perhaps like embracing the experience of experiencing.
Right.
Which is to say that if you embrace your experience, you're just holding on to the experience, and like you are protecting and shielding the experience away because it's your experience. It's yours. You must protect it. And then, as you said, the other side is just kind of like, like not trusting or like holding your experience as something that's valuable. But if you rather choose to experience what you are experiencing, that also means to evaluate, because when you experience things, you're kind of thinking and feeling and sort of like engaging with things. So if you're experiencing the experience itself, you're doing all those things to the experience, which means you can both appreciate it and learn from it and try to question and wonder about it in terms of yourself, but you're not toxically holding on to it. And yeah, Ramel, totally. I mean, this is something that, whoever, I mean, it seems like there's more people listening than ever before. Shout out to our record of like more than 2 people. Transcendentalism is totally like something we go back to off and on and on and on. And like, I guess we've referred to the pendulum quite a bit. That's also another motif that we get into for a lot of these relationships. But yeah, I mean, a big part of that is just kind of transcendental. But I think, as you say, the self-reliance, I mean, that only goes so far, and so far as we want this to be a sort of collective thing too, because you're also experiencing other people's experiences, hopefully.
Yes.
Because you're experiencing them if you're able to move around and see these other people and feel and engage and share these feelings with others. So it's
yeah.
I don't know. What do you guys think?
I'll hop in. Now that we've kind of come back to, and then kind of like past again, entertainment. Did Ramel have something that we wanted to acknowledge? I don't have Twitch up right now, but
yeah,
I don't know if you want.
He's been out here,
been,
contributing so much. Thank you.
Just nailing it on the head too. It's kind of like I wish I had the chat on screen so that like people on YouTube could see the comments and how like good and supportive they are.
That's why you got to subscribe to the Twitch, folks. Whoever's watching, participate in our sub mass culture.
Oh man,
sub meaning very much below mass.
Yeah. So yeah, we kind of talked about like traveling for those new experiences and perspectives does have a bit of a barrier to entry, a big barrier to entry, especially in Midwest United States, just
Right.
for, like you said, how many people and just the sheer landmass that you need to cover and the cash and gas that it takes to do that. But you can definitely start small with this for sure, though. Like, this is something that's more important, I'd say, now with COVID and isolation and just like even taking classes online. But if you just nurture this attitude for like an aversion to your own bedroom and your own laptop, because let's say from like the advertising perspective, if everyone's like locked up, consumption is probably going to go down, so that's not good, just general like spending. But if someone is only just watching like their Instagram feed, their Twitter feed, their YouTube recommendations, that's advertising dream come true.
Right.
Because all that advertising is, or for it to be effective, is you have to make people think that they need this product. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Right.
Yeah.
If you have someone that's connected with tons of people and tons of experiences, that's going to be really hard to do. If you have someone that's just sitting and sort of having this fed to them, that's going to be really, really easy.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is actually, of course, why like spending didn't really go down that much. I mean, think about all the people just buying things online
on Amazon. Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
So,
think about how much freaking money Amazon got in the past like year.
Right.
so with entertainment and with this tweet that we started with, like, for big companies, even if they're not trying to do it, but part of the frustration is people might just be seeing it and slowly thinking, all right, this is like what's entertaining. This is like the best that, Hollywood or whatever has to offer for anybody, let alone just me. That's going to be easier to do if you're a pinholed from a lot of different people and experiences. If like that's all you're seeing and you don't have like a lot else to go off of it, you're more and more you're going to start thinking, okay, this is just like what entertainment is. This is what I'm going to buy when I'm looking for a movie more and more. Whereas if you can find those new experiences, you're going to start to think, actually, this is way different than what I watched, recently on Prime Video. This is better. I like this more. I want to find more like this. And you're going to sort of break away from that.
Yeah.
So I think that might even be like I said, that's like sort of a help towards the gripe that this person was talking about in their tweet. It's
Right.
just giving yourself a chance to not be like sucked into it quite so much.
I'm curious, Trev. My mind jumps to this little tidbit from the Tao that says, like, when a nation lives in accordance to the Tao, none of the citizens will travel. No one goes on vacations because they are home wherever they're at. And obviously, there's many of ways to take that.
Many ways.
Many ways. But I sort of like kind of get this like scratching that like traveling and experiencing different things might be the sort of like other side of the pendulum of like just the algorithmic experience. So like on the one side is the algorithmic experience where you have something fed to you, and on the other one is a totally like unfed, unnatural, more like legitimized random seed where it's weird and not normal experience. And again, like I don't necessarily see what the off axis of that sort of pendulum is. I'm curious as to what you think about that.
Yeah, for the off axis, that might be tough because that's the goal always. That's what we're trying to get at, and it might not be
Right.
easy to see. But I know exactly what you're saying. Where on the one side of it, like you're looking at your Instagram feed, right? You have a ton of content. You're just going like with all of this stuff. Like there's got to be something mind blowing here. There's got to be something that I will have enjoyed spending the past hour doing this. Like something's got to be there. So same thing with travel. You could definitely take it that way. Like I got to find myself at one of these youth hostels, like just give me more traveling. Like none of this is working yet, And going back to what you said about the Tao, like, yeah, there's a lot of ways to take that. And like a knee-jerk reaction might be that's kind of I don't like that homebody attitude.
Right.
But I think if you really get into the Tao, from my limited understanding, it could be that just experience anywhere,
Yes.
even like in one spot, like there's so much there, like
Mhm.
that just goes missed. Like there's so much just in any experience that you could, once you really connect with it, you don't feel like you're starving for experience at all.
Yeah, I think that's how I conceptualize it as well. Is that everywhere experience is experience.
Right. Well, let's say, I mean, for me to give an off access to that in regards to traveling, from you, what would the off axis look like in terms of entertainment and consumption?
Right. So like when I conceptualize my ends that I'm trying to meet when I consume like entertainment, it is the sort of like home feeling, the like fulfillment, the good kind of like the quality that I felt as a very young child, like being mindless in my home, and like my dad wouldn't be home and I would be playing and my dad would be home, and all of a sudden dad's home and I'm playing with dad, and like there isn't like a sort of like a goal to what's happening. There's just like this sort of amorphous being and experience, and it's very free. Um, and sort of what happens when I am looking to consume is that sort of home feeling. Again, psychedelics are great for this sort of shit, but like not in speaking. um, and so when I think of an off access to entertainment and consumption, I think of instead of like anti-consumerism. Did I cut out a little bit? Yeah.
A little bit, but I don't think we missed any
moment.
words.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Instead of like an anti-consumerist sort of thing, it is more of a cultivating that quality of being in the space of love, being in the space of home, and realizing that I do not need to consume to feel at home, and I also don't need to be anti-consumerist to be at home. That existence of being in that experience, being in that timeless space, and reacting to the experience comes regardless of whether I am consuming or not consuming. And that quality is cultivated in various different ways. And so the adjacency axis would be, yeah. It's, let's take some like mushrooms. I've never done mushrooms, but let's do it on this podcast and like burn something down. I think that'll be interesting.
I would take mushrooms. I would not record and broadcast footage of myself taking mushrooms.
Wait. But for any
career development reasons.
For any authorities watching this, he said that sarcastically.
Yes.
He would not and has not taken any drug substances, unless the interviewer watching this is in the future when perhaps our country's drug policies are less draconian.
Yeah.
But if that's not the case, Trevor has not done. You should surely give him the job as your next pilot.
Yes.
Yeah. Also, two things. One is just SWAT. Could you remind us of the quote and origin of that about travel, about like not needing to travel that you?
Yeah, that is
up?
from
What?
the Tao Te Ching.
Yeah. What's the quote? Like, what you remember of it?
Yeah, when a country's people live in accordance with the Tao, they never travel because they're always at
Okay.
home.
Yeah. In a more literal sense, that reminded me of like the Saudi Arabian plan for their like super smart city called Neom, which is like
Is that the long
very
city?
much. It's like, yeah, it's antithetical to most of what we've always talked about. It's like this like incredibly like pervasive project of like this long, just miles and miles and miles of like one massive super city.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I mean, on one hand, connected by a subterranean sort of transportation system, is I think what they call it. So a good train system, which we love. but then also it would take like 90% of just available data from residents, whatever that means, to just like 9/10 of your life would just be in the hands of like the people who like operate this city.
Oh my
Do you
gosh.
get to pick? Do you get to pick which 9/10?
But like it would literally just track you. Like it's like a total like Black Mirror thing. So if we take this quote literally, the Dow is being pretty whack, I would say.
Oh, hell yeah, dude.
And then secondly, I just wanted to return to something Romel said about like Gandhi and like his writings, or like telling his readers to like not look at his old writings in hopes that they would like his ideas would grow and he would learn more. I'm not sure if he said that or not. I'm just going on face value for Romel saying that. But in general, I wish, and I think I've expressed this before, but I wish we were more comfortable both taking that upon ourselves and also holding other people to a similar philosophy. Because the idea that people are just static and they are what they are and they believe what they believe is just so deeply cynical and so deeply contrary to any idea of like building a political, social, cultural movement of people that care about the welfare of each other.
Right.
And that like beyond that sort of like philosophical belief, it's also just like, it's so sad to think that you or others could not learn or grow. Like life, as we're kind of teasing out here, is about experiencing experience and experiencing, period. And to think that that can be true, but also that people cannot grow and learn, like that just seems so sad and depressing. Like people, we're all, as you said, Swat, we're all just little babies that have grown up. We're all dynamic. We're all responding to each other and our environments and our atmospheres. And part of the beauty of what we define as life is being able to grow together and learn how to love and learn how to grow better together. So, okay, it's in the preface to the Hind Swaraj to the reader. Okay, well, thank you for citing your sources, Romel. We love that. We love source citation on here.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, I think, of course, that's not immediately relevant to today, but I think that is an important thing that I'll probably bring up quite often because it relates to a lot of different discussions, especially with politics.
Yeah, it reminds me of when you sent us that video of Lula, and when he was talking about like my ideas, like you cannot kill my ideas; they're already out there. Like you can kill my body, but I'm not going to be gone because
that's right.
Like even though Lula won't be around, like fighting for justice and peace and like an integrated humanity that transcends and it doesn't extract value in this sort of parasitic dogma that we have that exists separate and in this kind of like amorphous space of like we have access to this love no matter what, and like we can espouse here, us three, and say that this is our idea, but it really isn't. It's so much bigger than what we are doing or not doing or speaking or not speaking. Yeah.
And importantly, we might reinterpret or reimagine what we're saying now in a few weeks or months or years, and that's okay. Growth is good.
Yeah, I would hope that I do at any point in my life.
Yeah. It's nice to know that Gandhi's got my back though, you know? Holy.
What do you say?
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you.
He's practicing his manners.
Yeah.
I know there's so many.
I'm gonna run over my notes real quick again to see if there's anything that would be like pretty succinct that we can wrap up in a little bow tie, but
sure. And of course, there are still so many things that we opened up with @_Pem_Pem's thread about art and culture and our relation to them that we certainly have not harmonized or even addressed properly. But I think it's one that we'll probably come back to either intentionally or not quite often because it brings up a lot of important questions of knowledge production, of our relationship to art, our own relationship to creating it ourselves and popularizing things and the value and meaning of what it means for something to be popular. As you said, Swat, whether it's popular things becoming popular because we made them popular, or us engaging with things because they are popular.
Right.
So there's a lot here, and I encourage you guys to read this thread and think about it too. Let me paste this into the chat. It's good to mull on. I think there's a lot here, and I'm sure a lot of people that responded to the thread themselves have offered a lot of good things too. So I'm gonna read some of those responses and try to chew on them as well.
Wow. I feel good. You feel good?
I feel like I've experienced some things tonight. Tell you that much.
Trev, do you have any wrapping up stuff?
I mean, I guess I can send us out on like a parting thing here,
Mm-hmm.
which
Please.
also ties into feeling good when we're done with this. And this is maybe like less productive and like a little more salty on the state of the entertainment industry, but I like to think of, the Coen brothers and their movies,
Yeah.
and there's no like, not no, a lot of them there's not like a good resolution, and the point of these movies is to make you feel something.
Right.
That's like the only thing they're going for, and at least for me, they always do. And I think that it would be helpful, and it's not for everybody. A lot of people really just want that rom-com structure, but if we could go into any movie or TV show, or just kind of anytime we're looking to experience the way we would an art gallery rather than the way we would a seminar, I think that could be revolutionary. And a lot of people already do that, but I think in general, that's something that should be nurtured and more accepted.
I love that.
Yeah. I also think
We can
there's
talk
something
about
to
it more
say.
next time, but
There's certainly something to say about like kind of the like gatekeeping superiority complex of like analyzing art, of where I feel both that people should be more comfortable being over analytical about art and like kind of have that gatekeeping mentality. But I mean, not necessarily the gatekeeping mentality.
Yeah, I was gonna say, all right, easy there.
Well, it's like if personally, I don't care if someone tries to gatekeep me. It's like, okay, I'll be outside of your little zone. Like, I'm not a real Beatles fan. Like, we're cool. And so, like, in that way, like, I don't have a necessary problem with like the gatekeeping, but that sort of like mind of like busting into something, it's what that thing is pulling out of you. And having that personal connection with it instead of what is this person trying to tell me. That's exactly what Trev just said in a easier, simpler, faster way. I'm sorry.
The sanity ship was at sea and watching like a sane like lighthouse, and then said, "Fuck the lighthouse."
Yeah,
just slip over the horizon.
I'm just gonna keep sailing.
Yeah. All right.
Well, on that note, cheers to feeling more.
See you at Mike's.
I'll see you at Mike's.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'll be seeing you at Mike's.
Hey man, integrate with your brethren and your sisterin and your themrin.
And your themrin. Thank you. I was trying to think which way to go. I was going to say theythrin, but themthrin I think sounds a bit better.
Yeah.
Your preferred jelly beans, as they say.
Preferred jelly beans. And don't stop loving.
Don't stop loving, baby. Cheers.
Cheers.